welcome back to another deep dive. And wow, today we are getting into something that is, well, it's pretty intense.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to put it.
Well, I mean, we're looking at an ebook from 2025 by Connie Riker, and it's called Lean Out: How to Prioritize Family as a Female Under Female Supremacy.
Right.
And, even just the title gives you a sense of where we're headed. But before we even get to the table of contents, she has this really unusual disclaimer.
Well, the warning at the beginning.
Exactly. She explicitly tells the reader, if you're looking for comfort or a gentle path to self-improvement, just put the book down immediately.
She's ruffled back.
Not at all. She calls the text a work of edutainment, but then she follows that up by calling it a literal declaration of war against the foundational structures of patriarchy.
Which is a massive hook.
It really is. So today, our mission is to unpack this completely radical, uncompromising text. We're exploring a philosophy that views traditional corporate empowerment not as a victory, but literally as a suicide note.
Yeah.
And real quick, before we jump into the deep end here, please take a second to like and subscribe to the show. It really helps us out, and it ensures you never miss one of these explorations.
So before we get into the actual chapters, it is so crucial to frame exactly how we are approaching this text today.
Right, the ground rules.
Exactly. Our goal here is purely analytical. We are essentially putting on our anthropologist hats to dissect the architecture of what is a highly politically charged, extremely polarizing manifesto.
Absolutely.
Because this book systematically attacks masculinity, it targets traditional nuclear family structures, and really, the pillars of Western civilization as we know it.
It pulls zero punches.
None. And we want to make it explicitly clear to you listening, we are not here taking a side.
Right.
We aren't endorsing Riker's matriarchal worldview, and we aren't actively promoting the ideology. We are just acting as impartial reporters.
Just analyzing the ideas.
Exactly. Our objective is just to understand how she constructs these really intense arguments. It's a fascinating study in extreme ideological architecture.
And you really see that architectural intent before you even read a single word. I mean, the cover art alone.
Oh, the cover art sets the tone immediately.
It does. It's so striking. So picture this. It features 5 women, and they're dressed in these flowing black robes, wearing traditional pointed black witch hats.
Right.
And they're standing in a closed circle, looking down at a woven straw man that's just lying on the ground, like an effigy.
Yeah, an effigy.
It's unapologetic. It tells you right away we are not dealing with a gentle, reformist critique of modern feminism.
No. And the imagery of the witch and the effigy, that is a highly deliberate semiotic choice by Riker.
How so?
Well, historically, the witch represents a very specific kind of female power, one that exists entirely outside the jurisdiction of patriarchal institutions.
Right. She's not part of the system.
Exactly. A witch is uncategorized, she's unmanaged, and therefore inherently terrifying to the status quo. She draws her power from nature, from the esoteric.
Rather than from male-granted authority.
Exactly. So by placing that imagery over a literal straw man, Riker is signaling to the reader that she has zero interest in reforming the current system.
She's not asking for better maternity leave.
No, she isn't asking for policy changes at all. She is interested in completely incinerating the existing paradigm.
And she starts that incineration by going straight for the throat of the Lenin era.
Right, chapter 1.
Yeah. For the better part of the last decade, Sheryl Sandberg's Lenin philosophy has been, the mainstream gold standard for professional women.
The whole idea of asserting yourself.
Right. Negotiating harder, demanding a seat at the corporate table, overcoming your own hesitations to climb the ladder.
And Riker just completely rejects that.
She frames it as an act of profound betrayal. She literally calls the Lenin philosophy a suicide note written in corporate pastels.
It's a devastating critique.
It really is.
Because her fundamental argument here is structural. She's saying that the table Sheryl Sandberg is inviting women to sit at, well, it was conceptualized by men, built by men, and it operates exclusively on a masculine logic of extraction.
Right, infinite growth.
Exactly. So asking women to participate more enthusiastically in that capitalist structure, Riker says that isn't empowerment. It is a trick.
A trick to make them what she calls decorative fig leaves for the patriarchy.
Yes. Because you might put a female CEO in charge of a Fortune 500 company, But if the machine itself still runs on the exact same ruthless mechanics,
Then nothing has actually changed.
right, the woman has just been assimilated into the apparatus of her own subjugation.
She's just agreeing to become a more efficient oppressor, which leads right into this fascinating concept Riker introduces called the death of equilibrium.
This part is so interesting.
It is, and this sociological phenomenon she terms chrononormativity. I want to linger on this because it radically shifts how we perceive the 9 to 5 workday.
It really does.
She argues that the concept of time itself is a weapon deployed against women. How does she build that bridge between, a time card and systemic violence?
Well, chrononormativity is one of her most intellectually dense concepts. She argues that the rigid punch-in, punch-out schedule is just an artificial construct.
Born out of the Industrial Revolution.
Right. It mimics the duration of sunlight in an agrarian society, which was explicitly designed to maximize male physical labor.
But she says this completely ignores female biology.
Completely. She asserts that female bodies operate on fluid, lunar rhythms. They're cyclical.
More like tides than an internal combustion engine.
Exactly. So by forcing a woman into a temporal box designed by and for a male-dominated machine, society is actually committing an act of structural violence. It's denying her natural equilibrium.
And she says the ultimate manifestation of that violence is the supermom trope.
Oh, yes.
The cultural expectation that a woman should work a relentless 9 to 5, maintain a pristine house, and raise perfectly adjusted kids.
Riker doesn't see the supermom as a hero at all.
No. She sees her as the victim of a massive psychological operation, a tool of exhaustion.
Because if a woman is perpetually drained, trying to meet these chrononormative standards.
She has no energy left for insurrection.
Precisely. Riker views the whole girl boss aesthetic as a pacification mechanism. I think she even jokingly calls it a CIA-backed psychological operation.
She does. It's wild. But her point makes sense within her framework. If you convince women their empowerment lies in hustling 80 hours a week for a promotion,
they won't look up and realize the whole economy is built on their disenfranchisement.
Right. It reminds me of the analogy of walking into a rigged casino.
Yeah, the casino analogy is perfect.
If you know the games are mathematically rigged and the casino was built using your stolen money, why would you sit at the blackjack table and try to learn how to count cards?
Right. Why play?
Why try to win at a table you can just flip over?
And flipping the table is exactly what she's advocating with her redefinition of lean out.
Because usually leaning out implies taking a step back, maybe downshifting your career.
Often with an undertone of defeat.
Yeah, or resignation. But Riker strips all of that away.
She does. In her architecture, leaning out is a militant, strategic withdrawal of labor.
So what does that actually look like? How do you militantly lean out of a society you live in?
She proposes what she calls the domestic sabbatical.
But not a vacation.
No, not at all. She is describing a global, synchronized general strike. Riker operates on the premise that the entire global economy rests completely on the unpaid domestic and emotional labor of women.
So she just tells them to stop.
Stop all productive labor, stop managing household schedules, stop doing the invisible administrative tasks at the office.
Stop being the emotional shock absorbers for male colleagues.
Exactly. It's an intentional collapse.
She has that crazy quote where she says, "Let the trash pile up in the streets."
Let the children go hungry until the men realize they cannot feed themselves without us.
It is so dark. It's an uncompromising assertion of dominance through the total denial of service.
She wants to starve the beast until it capitulates. Because her hypothesis is that the patriarchal system is actually incredibly fragile.
It projects strength, but it relies on that invisible supply chain of female care.
Sever the supply chain and the edifice crumbles.
And this is where we really transition into the darkest and most controversial core of her philosophy.
Yes, the biological arguments.
If her critique of the girl boss era felt intense, her views on biology are just staggering. She introduces this framework called the syllogism of oppression.
Right.
And her fundamental premise here is that men are, quote, victims of their own biology.
So to understand the mechanics of this, we really have to look at the historical context. Riker is engaging in a very specific type of rhetorical mirroring here.
How so?
Well, for centuries, male-dominated medical and scientific institutions used biological determinism to justify subjugating women.
Right, claiming women were biologically inferior, prone to hysteria.
Exactly. Dictated by hormones, intellectually limited, Riker takes that exact blueprint of biological determinism and completely inverts it to target men.
The rhetorical flip is audacious. She looks at the Y chromosome and literally claims it is a genetic stutter.
A broken X chromosome.
Yeah. And from that premise, she extrapolates that this biological defect is the root cause of all male aggression and insecurity.
Because men do not possess wombs.
Right. Because they can't physically gestate or create life, she argues they are driven by this subconscious, overwhelming necrophiliac death drive.
And that concept of the death drive is so central to her thesis. She posits that because men are disconnected from the mechanism of creating life, they develop this frantic need to control it.
To categorize it and ultimately destroy it.
Right. In her view, every war, every extractive industry, every oppressive legal framework is just a symptom of this biological emptiness.
And she applies this death drive directly to modern politics, specifically the 2022 Dobbs decision that overturned Roe v. Wade and other anti-abortion laws.
Yes. This is where the theory crashes into the real world.
She doesn't frame the abortion debate as a disagreement over legal precedent or fetal personhood.
Not at all. She frames these legislative acts as literal manifestations of male necrophilic violence.
Acts of violence by a biologically obsolete demographic.
Right, trying to assert violent ownership over the female body to compensate for their own genetic inability to create.
She argues they legislate reproductive systems because they are terrified of their own irrelevance.
By forcing a woman to carry a pregnancy, the system is artificially inserting itself into a biological process it is otherwise excluded from.
And she uses this searing metaphor for this. She says that trying to have a rational dialogue with the patriarchy is like trying to hold a town hall with a virus.
You don't negotiate with a pathology.
Right. You don't try to nurse a wolf back to health while its jaws are clamped around your leg.
So then, how does she instruct women to deal with male grievances?
She explicitly tells them to deploy Darvo.
Now, Darvo deny, attack, and reverse victim and offender. That is traditionally used to identify the manipulative tactics of abusers in psychology.
Right. An abuser denies the behavior, attacks the victim, and claims they are the true victim.
But Riker completely inverts this.
She tells readers to use Darvo as an aggressive tactical weapon.
So when a man complains that he is being marginalized by female ambition,
Riker says women should laugh, deny his victimhood, attack his biological incompetence, and reverse the roles.
let him feel the sting of systemic dismissal. Because in her eyes, his oppression is just the painful exposure of his parasitic reliance on female labor.
When you look at this objectively, you really have to note how closely this mirrors historical supremacist movements.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Whenever an ideology seeks to justify the complete subjugation or disenfranchisement of a demographic, the first step is always pseudo-biology.
You strip them of their humanity, call them a virus or a genetic stutter.
And frame them as a biological threat to a pure group. Riker is using that exact historical blueprint.
But using it as the foundation for a matriarchal takeover.
An undeniable mandate for female supremacy.
So if she views the male biological drive as this destructive parasitic force, how does she rationalize marriage? Or the family?
She doesn't.
I want to ask you, the listener, to consider how you define family. What does that structure represent? Because for Connie Riker, the nuclear family is a holding pen for female labor.
She even classifies romantic love as a parasitic infection.
A parasitic infection. It's wild. She strips away all the sentimentality and cultural mythology.
She examines the family entirely through a ruthless Marxist economic lens. She argues the isolated nuclear family is a recent sociological invention designed to isolate women from communal support networks.
Like the extended village or tribe?
Right, rendering them entirely dependent on a single male income.
But she views that male income as fake. She argues male productivity in the capitalist marketplace is entirely propped up by the care economy.
Meaning all the unpaid domestic and emotional labor provided by women at home.
Right. Every dollar a man earns is only possible because a woman is expending her labor to feed him, clean his clothes, and absorb his emotional debris.
So she views the father figure as a redundant appendage.
A biological afterthought. Once conception occurs, he serves no purpose.
And keeping him anchored in a nuclear family just enslaves the woman.
She takes aim at some very specific cultural phenomena to illustrate this trap, like the trad wife aesthetic on social media.
Yes, the ballerina farm example.
Exactly. She explicitly names accounts like Ballerina Farm on TikTok. Millions of women watch these beautifully shot videos of a woman in a prairie dress making sourdough from scratch.
Riker diagnoses this as digital Stockholm syndrome.
Which is such a striking phrase.
She argues viewers aren't observing pastoral beauty, they are watching a hallucination. The trad wife aesthetic is just the act of romanticizing servitude.
It filters the brutal reality of subjugation through this vintage aesthetic lens to make the cage look inviting.
To convince women their disenfranchisement is actually a noble choice.
But conversely, if she despises the trad wife who gives away her labor, how does she view women who extract wealth from men?
This is a profound pivot. She completely rehabilitates the concept of the gold digger.
Right. Usually gold digger is a slur used to shame women. But Riker reframes them as heroes. She calls them Robin Hoods of the bedroom.
Because if a woman is forced to operate in a society where men control the capital, while she refuses to perform unpaid domestic labor,
then marrying a wealthy man just to extract his capital is direct political action.
she refers to them as reparations collectors, bypassing the rigged casino and siphoning resources back to the female class.
And she takes this even further with the male appliance theory.
Which is fascinating.
She says if a man is just an extraction agent for resources, why limit yourself to monogamy? She advocates for polyandry,
One woman extracting resources from multiple men simultaneously.
setting the woman at the center of the family as a monarch, managing these men like household appliances.
And she grounds this in real-world anthropology to show it isn't just theoretical. She points to the Mosul people of China.
Right, the matrilineal society in the Himalayas.
Yes, they are known for their walking marriages. Women own the land, lineage is traced through the mother, and sexual partnerships are completely decoupled from economics and child-rearing.
Fathers don't live with their biological children.
They're raised collectively in the mother's communal household.
Riker praises this as the ideal model for autonomous breeding, proving that the patriarchal nuclear family is a constructed prison, not the natural order.
So if the goal is to sever reliance on the male figure at home, what about women who still have to survive in the current economy?
Let's move to the corporate battlefield. Riker has a massive chapter titled The Whore of Authority.
Her manual for operating within existing male corporate systems until they collapse.
It's essentially a guide to guerrilla warfare.
She provides a framework for psychological survival and sabotage.
One of the biggest deconstructions here is her attack on imposter syndrome.
For decades, women have been diagnosed with this feeling that they are frauds who don't belong in the boardroom.
But Riker cites a KPMG study and completely dismantles the diagnosis. She re-diagnoses it as oppression fatigue.
Right. She argues women don't feel like frauds because they're inadequate. They feel cognitive dissonance because they're forced to operate in a reality that actively denies their nature.
Because corporate competence and professionalism have been defined by men.
The baseline expectation is basically acting like a man.
So when a woman tries to excel in that environment while staying true to her intuitive, fluid nature, her brain short circuits.
It isn't self-doubt. It's the toll of existing as an alien in a hostile environment.
She uses Susan Fowler's 2017 blog post about Uber to illustrate how a woman can break this cycle.
Fowler meticulously documented the systemic misogyny and HR cover-ups at Uber.
And that single post triggered a domino effect that ousted the CEO.
But Riker doesn't view it just as whistleblowing. She elevates it to a spiritual exorcism.
By holding up a mirror to Silicon Valley, Fowler forced the bro culture to gaze at its own grotesque reflection until it shattered.
Riker instructs her readers that they possess this same destructive capability.
She says, weaponize everything the patriarchy historically hates about you. Weaponize the bitch label.
If demanding equal pay and refusing to coddle incompetence makes you a bitch,
Yeah.
embrace it. Let it serve as your armor.
And then she explores the cry bully phenomenon.
Which is a brilliant dissection of office politics.
It really is her observation of how men weaponize their rare displays of emotion to derail accountability.
Imagine a male executive called out for bias. He gets defensive, visibly upset, claims he's misunderstood.
And suddenly the dynamic shifts.
Yeah.
The woman is now socially obligated to manage his emotional fragility and back down.
To counter this, Riker targets the work of Brene Brown.
Right. Brene Brown teaches that vulnerability is strength. Exposing our raw emotions is key to connection.
But Riker subverts this completely. She argues that in the corporate battlefield, vulnerability is not for connection. It is an act of warfare.
She asserts that the male psyche, built on repression and linear logic, is incredibly fragile when confronted with raw female emotion.
When a woman exposes her raw emotion in a boardroom, she is detonating an emotional bomb.
She calls it the armor of tears. She tells women their tears are not a weakness, they're a currency of power that men lack the processing power to compute.
A woman crying disrupts the logical flow of the male space.
Wow.
It introduces chaos into an environment designed for control.
She is advocating for women to be emotionally volatile on purpose, to dismantle corporate decorum.
But surviving the corporate world is only temporary. To change the future, Riker argues you must fundamentally rewrite the past.
Which brings us to her assault on the education system and history itself. She views all recorded human history as a holocaust of female intellect.
Because of her syllogism of oppression. If history was written by men driven by a necrophiliac need to control, then the record is irreparably corrupted.
The historian's pen is a weapon of erasure.
So she concludes mainstream history is a massive fabrication, a propaganda tool of male supremacy. She demands the replacement of history with herstory.
She uses the theory of relativity as a provocative example.
She focuses on Albert Einstein's first wife, Mileva Maric.
Right. While historians debate Marriage's exact contributions, Riker abandons nuance entirely.
She demands we assume Maric actually authored the theory.
Maybe scribbling it on a napkin while doing unpaid domestic labor, and
Yeah.
that Albert simply stole it.
Riker argues this isn't an anomaly. Virtually every great man in history was just a plagiarist propped up by the stolen labor of brilliant women.
Because they were denied the education or legal standing to claim credit. And because of this, she extends her disdain to the modern public school system.
She views public schools as male-centric incubators of violence.
She points to the 1999 Columbine massacre, not as an anomaly or a mental health failure, but as the mathematically certain result of toxic male socialization functioning as designed.
She argues the school structure nurtures male aggression and suppresses female intuition.
Keeping boys and girls in the same facility is like keeping a loaded firearm in a nursery.
Inherently negligent.
She also goes after classical literature with a vengeance. Specifically, Homer's The Odyssey.
The foundational text of the Western hero's journey.
Right. We're taught Odysseus is a cunning hero fighting his way home. Riker reads it and calls it a manifesto of stalking and rape apologism.
She points out Odysseus abandons Penelope for 2 decades, has numerous affairs, and then returns to slaughter a room full of suitors in territorial violence.
While Penelope is lionized just for being a silent, waiting housewife,
Riker demands books like The Odyssey be locked in a restricted poison archive.
only accessible to mature scholars studying the pathology of the oppressor.
So what is her actionable alternative for a mother today?
The subversive educator, a highly radicalized form of homeschooling.
But framed as a guerrilla tactic to starve the state of compliant future subjects, cutting off the supply of indoctrinated citizens,
She details a curriculum that includes teaching kindergarten girls emotional self-defense.
training a 5-year-old to identify gaslighting and mansplaining before she can read chapter books.
And she explicitly instructs followers to weaponize the work of philosopher Judith Butler.
Butler's theory of gender performativity, the idea that gender is not biological truth, but a culturally constructed script we act out.
Riker wants this translated into practical lessons for young girls, so they understand that acting like a lady is just a script written by dead patriarchs.
And because it's just a script, they have the power to tear it up.
The goal is to raise an entire generation of warriors decoupled from the need for male validation, bypassing the male tax and social systems entirely.
Building a new architecture of reality from the ground up.
Which brings us to the end game, the era of the mother, a gynocentric utopia ruled by female intuition and collective care.
But to get there, society needs a spiritual and psychological purge called the Phoenix Protocol.
A mandate for every woman to ruthlessly destroy her internalized good girl persona.
Riker resurrects the biblical figure of Jezebel as the ultimate archetype.
Jezebel, usually the ultimate villain, the idolatrous queen thrown out a window.
Riker reclaims her. She urges women to embrace the Jezebel ethos.
Arguing Jezebel's crime was just her refusal to submit to male power structures, defiance as supreme sovereignty.
Women must burn off their accommodating masks and find power in the ashes of their compliance.
And this ties into how she views the planet itself. She leans into the Gaia hypothesis.
Viewing the Earth not as a dead rock, but as a living, female entity.
A female body infected by the masculine logic of extraction and fossil fuel dependency.
The climate crisis isn't a technical issue. It is a literal fever brought on by the infection of masculinity.
The Earth is trying to shake off a parasite, and total female stewardship is the only cure.
But stewarding the planet requires resources, which brings us to welfare colonialism.
The policy proposals here are so absolute, an economic system that operates as a parasite on whatever remains of male labor.
The first step is a jubilee of debt. The immediate cancellation of all female-held debt globally.
Student loans, mortgages, medical debt.
Because the banking system is a patriarchal shackle keeping women indentured. If the system is illegitimate, the debt is null and void.
But the real mechanism is reparations for existence, an inescapable global taxation on men.
Based on her syllogism of oppression. Because male history is an ongoing crime against female nature, men must pay a punitive tax simply for the privilege of existing in the new era.
Extracted wealth funneled directly to fund the matriarchy, the communal households, subversive educators, and domestic sabbaticals.
Designed to bleed the male class dry and permanently shift global power.
And how is this coordinated? Riker points out this delicious irony regarding the digital age.
Social media platforms were built by socially amped male engineers to monetize attention.
But women have fundamentally co-opted them.
Weaponizing the algorithms, using hashtags, whisper networks, and block buttons to build a global digital panopticon.
Enforcing accountability and sharing subversive ideologies at the speed of light. She says, they gave us the network and we gave it a soul.
Using the tools of the master to dismantle the master's house and live streaming the demolition.
It is an uncompromising vision.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you to mull over. We spent this time dissecting a manifesto that fights systemic oppression by creating a mirrored system of supremacy.
Riker's matriarchy utilizes the exact same tools the patriarchy historically used.
Biological determinism to dehumanize. Economic disenfranchisement to extract labor. Ideological indoctrination to rewrite history.
So the question is, when a revolution relies entirely on mirroring the oppressor's most brutal tactics, does it actually break the wheel of power?
Or does it simply flip the board, guaranteeing that the cycle of domination and brutal retaliation will continue forever?
That is the ultimate, inescapable question here. What an incredibly dense and fascinating journey.
Absolutely.
Whether you view Connie Riker's book as a fiery provocation that offers a genuine blueprint for liberation, or as a terrifying descent into radical misandry, there is no denying it is a fascinating piece of modern literature.
It challenges every assumption about society, time, and biology.
If your curiosity is hooked and you want to experience the sheer rhetorical force of this wild text firsthand, you need to read it. You can check out Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books to buy Lean Out today.
It demands to be read directly. The intensity of her prose and arguments can only be fully grasped by engaging with the source material yourself.
And if you want to keep up with the author's ongoing writings and see how this movement is evolving, you should follow her directly at Conrad Rikers at Substack.
It's definitely worth following the evolution of these ideas.
Thank you so much for joining us on this intense anthropological expedition today. Please remind yourself one last time to like and subscribe to The Deep Dive to ensure you never miss another exploration of the world's most fascinating, polarizing, and mind-bending ideas. We will see you next time.